Today we have our Ram back in the shop to cover the next stage of its build. We're very excited to go over the suspension upgrade that we'll cover in this video. Before we dive into what we've done to the Ram, let's cover what was already on the truck. So up front, we're running 2 3/4 inch Thuren lift coils. In the back, 1 inch of lift, also Thuren soft ride lift coils. At all 4 corners, we have been running King 2.5 inch diameter remote reservoir shocks. Like we covered in our last video, when you raise the suspension on this truck, the axle wants to come out of its natural geometry, so we have been running an adjustable track bar. Same thing in the rear. When you want to run bigger tires on a kit like this, you've got to consider both wheel offset and then also your radius arms. The Alien radius arms we've been running on our truck from Thuren do a few things for us. They correct the caster. So when you create lift in the truck and it reduces caster, these Alien radius arms allow us to correct that caster so the truck drives straight down the road. They also have an offset in their geometry that allows us to clear these big 35, 37 inch tires, which we've been running. Lastly, we have an active rate sway bar that's been great both on and off road. Today's upgrade is the Thuren Predator Kit. This revises the 4-link geometry in the rear, and it adds 3-inch bypass shocks by King at all 4 corners. On the 3500 series Ram trucks, they come equipped with leaf springs. We'll cover that in a future video. The 2500 trucks, like the one behind us here today, sit on coil springs with a 4-link. And they work great, and they provide an excellent ride, especially when you're not towing or running a big camper. This truck drives great. But there are some issues with that 4-link. The first is at each end of the links, there are rubber bushings. These rubber bushings allow for some play in the suspension. And this is especially apparent when you put 1,000 foot-pounds of torque to that rear axle and you start to flex the 4-link. The next issue with the 4-link from Ram is that the links are actually too close together and they don't provide enough leverage on the axle itself. And lastly, the geometry of the 4-link is just not ideal. The truck has poor anti-squat characteristics. These design issues from Ram may never be noticed by the average driver who spends all their time on pavement. But if you spend enough time off pavement in loose sand or mud, or you're driving around like we have here in Tahoe in deep snow, there's one symptom that you almost immediately notice when you start to lose traction. When these 2500 trucks start spinning a rear tire, the axle will actually hop. So that poor anti-squat geometry, that flexible bushing, rubber bushing in the end of the 4-link actually allows the axle to wrap and load and unload and hop. And this means that if we're going up a hill off-road or we're trying to climb a steep driveway in the snow, our axle will actually start to bounce on us and we've got to let off the gas and stop. Sometimes you can actually bounce off the trail if you keep your foot in the gas. The Thuren Predator Kit actually addresses all of these issues. The kit comes with 4 new links, and at the end of those links, instead of these rubber OEM bushings, we now have machined bushings, taking the slop out of the system. New brackets are provided at the frame and at the axle that separate our 4-link geometry, and they actually change what's called the instant center. The instant center is the point, the imaginary point, if you extend those 4 links to where they cross. So the instant center is raised in the truck to eliminate this axle hop that we experience so frequently off-road. A bonus to the kit is that the lower links are actually billet. So they're lighter, they're stronger, and man, do they look good. In addition to correcting the suspension geometry, the Thuren Predator Kit comes with 4 new 3-inch King bypass shocks. Now this does a few things for us. The 2.5 inch Kings we've been running on the truck so far have been great. They've been really, really great on and off road. But the limitation to those shocks is that they provide the same compression dampening and rebound dampening through their entire stroke. So in order for the shock to have enough compression dampening that we can send it and not bottom out the truck on a big whooper or a rise, it has to be valved to be stiff throughout its entire stroke. So as the shock compresses, that piston is forced through oil, through holes in the piston, and it applies the same amount of force at that first ½ inch as it does at the last ½ inch. You can change the valving in your shock, and you can valve your shock lighter or stiffer, but it's going to be the same through the entire range. A bypass shock gives us some extra capability in our suspension. One of the goals with this kit was to be able to run this truck through whoops, rises, around corners, over jumps at higher speed. We wanted to be able to really send this truck off-road. And the downside to a conventional shock is that the piston runs through the body of the shock with the same force through the entire stroke. So on that compression stroke, that first inch and that last inch provide the same compression dampening, the same force back on the suspension. And while that's fine for nearly all users, if we're gonna really test the limits of this truck and take it to a higher speed and be more confident in those off-road obstacles, we wanna go with a bypass shock. We wanna step it up to the next level. What a bypass shock does, just like the name sounds like, is that it bypasses the piston. So as our shock receives input from the suspension and the shaft goes up into the body, the piston is forced against fluid in the shock. What this shock does is it allows that fluid, that shock oil, to go around the piston. It bypasses the piston through the tube. So for the first several inches of our shock compression, the shaft may be able to move easily, fluid goes around the piston, and then when our suspension compresses enough and it goes past that bypass tube, it closes. And then we're in a second zone on the shock. As the piston moves up, fluid is, in this case, going through a second bypass tube that provides a little more resistance than the first one did. So that second zone is a little bit firmer. And then as we get past that second bypass tube on these rear shocks, then all fluid, it closes, and all fluid is required to go through the piston, the stiffest compression dampening of the range. So we can have soft, medium, hard before our suspension contacts our bump stops. What this particular bypass shock also does for us is it gives us 2 zones of rebound. So just like on the compression stroke, if the suspension is fully loaded, let's say we get full compression, we get to our bump stops, as the truck recovers and the suspension gets back to normal, the shaft strokes out of the body of the shock, and in that first zone, fluid's allowed to bypass the piston through the rebound bypass tube. And then as the suspension continues to get back to normal and recover, we get past the rebound bypass tube, it closes, and then all fluid again is forced through the piston in the shock. So our rebound is quick at first and then slow towards the end of the stroke. So 2 stages of rebound. So before we take the truck off-road and show what this kit is capable of, let's take a walk around and look at the Predator Kit on the Ram 2500. Before we go to the Predator Kit upgrades, let's talk about what has not changed. We're still running the 2 3/4 inch Thuren lift coils. We're still running the adjustable track bar. We're still running the torsion sway bar. And of course, these big beefy radius arms. And you can see in their geometry that they're set up to clear these 37-inch tires we're running. That's unchanged. What's new up front in the Predator Kit is this 3-inch King bypass shock with remote reservoir, and this is actually adjustable. So we can set our compression dampening here. We also can set the bypass tube force in both compression and rebound. So just like the front, let's talk about what hasn't changed in the back first. The first thing that's unchanged is the Thuren track bar, which corrects suspension geometry just like it does in the front. That's unchanged. Sway bar links are unchanged, and then our bump stops are unchanged. We run these full travel bags when we're towing or if we have a sled deck in the truck, and then we swap those out for these quickly removable boogie bump stops, also from Thuren, that we run whenever there's not a load in the truck. That's pretty much it for unchanged, except for the 1-inch lift coils. Aside from that, it's all new suspension geometry. So new brackets on the frame side. Those brackets do require a little clearancing upon installation. New brackets on the axle side, new upper links, and then of course those bling lower billet links. We've got limit straps now for this new suspension geometry, so we have so much droop and so much less torsional resistance in those machine bushings. We don't want to lose a coil at full droop. And then of course the heart of the system is this bypass shock with 2 bypass tubes on compression, 1 bypass tube on rebound, and of course the whole 3-inch shock has a remote reservoir. So that's it for the Predator kit for the rear of the truck. We've been doing some extensive testing with the Predator kit, and we've been really impressed. It still rails around corners like it always did before. We fly down washboard roads at higher speed. We can hit whoops without having to slow down, go over rises, and just fully send it. Been really happy with how this kit's worked out. So far, we have not found a compromise in this system. We're still able to rally it around town, take it on long drives on the highway, and it still has great manners for an on-road truck. But we've been really, really happy with this kit, and we look forward to the next video where we're going to cover some performance upgrades to both the motor and transmission of this truck. So if you've got a truck like the one behind me and you want to build one you can fully send, reach out to us at SierraAdventureVehicles.com or send us a message on Instagram at Sierra Adventure Vehicles, and we can make your dream a reality.